You know, there's a really good chance you're watching this on a Samsung device right now. Maybe you've got a Galaxy phone in your pocket, or a smartwatch on your wrist, heck, maybe even a smart fridge in your kitchen. This brand is so much a part of our lives, it's kind of easy to forget it wasn't always this huge tech giant.
But have you ever really stopped to think about where that name even came from? The story behind that logo? Well, it's got everything. War, powerful family dynasties, and a massive, high-stakes gamble that literally changed the course of technology for all of us.
Okay, let's just dive right into this because this is wild. The same company that makes your cutting-edge foldable phone started out back in 1938 as a tiny little trading company. And what were they trading? Noodles, dried fish, and local vegetables. Seriously. The journey from that small shop to a global powerhouse is just an incredible story of ambition, survival, and constantly reinventing itself.
So here's how we're going to break down this epic story. We'll start with its chaotic beginnings as the Three Stars. Then we'll get into how it became a Korean giant. After that, we'll cover the quality revolution that pretty much saved the company, touch on the scandals that have shaken it to its core, and finally look at its massive new bet on AI.
All right, first up, the survivor's origins. Because to really get Samsung, you first have to understand the world it was born into. And that world was a Korea under colonial rule, about to be torn apart by war.
Yeah, Samsung wasn't founded in some peaceful, easy time. It was born in 1938, while Korea was a colony of the Japanese Empire. And then, just a little over a decade later, the Korean War breaks out, tearing the peninsula apart and forcing the company to basically flee and start all over again. This was a company that was truly forged in crisis.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the founder's background. Lee Byung-chul wasn't just some random guy. His family was part of the Yongbon, which was the traditional landed nobility, the ruling class. This meant he had a privileged position and probably the connections and resources to even attempt to start a business in such a turbulent time.
And the name he picked? Samsung. In Korean, it means 3 stars, and it's a name that's deeply rooted in Korean folklore. You have to imagine, in the time of foreign occupation, choosing a name like that, it was a small but pretty powerful statement about national identity. Okay, so let's move on, because after the Korean War, the story of Samsung just explodes. This is the part where they go from being a small trading company to a true industrial giant. And to understand that explosion, you have to understand this word, chaebol. A chaebol is basically a massive, family-owned conglomerate. And back then, the South Korean government was actively helping them grow with friendly policies. The whole idea was to industrialize the nation as fast as possible, and companies like Samsung were the chosen engines for that growth. And just look at how fast they moved. In the 50s, they're in sugar and textiles. By the 60s, they've jumped into insurance and department stores. The 70s, now they're in electronics and shipbuilding. And by the 80s, telecommunications. They didn't just grow, they expanded into almost every single corner of the Korean economy. They became the definition of a chaebol. But this rapid growth led them to a really critical moment in their history. When they decided to get into the mobile phone business, well, they hit a wall. A very, very big wall. Just look at these numbers. Back when Samsung entered the mobile phone market in its home country of Korea, Motorola was king. They had a 60% market share. And Samsung? They were this tiny little player with just 10%. They were a total underdog, and to be honest, their early phones were just not good.
In fact, they weren't just not good, they were, to put it bluntly, bad. Their early products were infamous for poor performance and terrible quality. It got so bad that there were serious talks inside the company about just quitting the mobile phone business entirely.
And this is the turning point. In 1995, the founder's son, Chairman Lee Kun-hee, made a legendary decision. He announced a new quality-first strategy. He actually had a bonfire of 150,000 defective phones built right in front of the employees just to hammer the message home. The whole company shifted its focus from making cheap stuff to creating world-class tech. It was a massive, massive gamble.
And wow, did that gamble pay off? They poured money into R&D, they eventually surpassed their big rival Sony as a top global brand, and then in 2010, they launched the Galaxy S. That phone was a total game changer, and it put them on the path becoming the #1 smartphone brand in the entire world.
But you know, when you're on top of the world, everyone's watching. So the modern era for Samsung hasn't just been about success. It's also been defined by some pretty major scandals and dilemmas.
One of the worst was the GOS scandal. It turned out that Samsung's game-optimizing service was deliberately slowing down or throttling more than 10,000 apps on their best phones. We're talking popular games and even apps like Instagram. But here's the kicker. They made sure to exclude benchmarking apps. So in tests, the phones looked super fast, but in real life, they were slower. The fallout was huge, leading to an official apology from the CEO.
And on top of that, the handover of power to the third generation of the family was a total mess. It was plagued by legal battles, including a bribery scandal that actually sent the new leader, Lee Jae-young, to prison. It got so bad that he made a public apology and promised that his own kids would not inherit the company. I mean, that's a shocking statement, and it could mean the beginning of the end for that traditional family-run chaebol model.
So, where does a company that's conquered pretty much every industry go from here? Well, for Samsung, the answer is crystal clear: artificial intelligence.
And they are not just dipping their toes in the water here. They are planning to invest an absolutely massive $22 billion into these next-gen technologies. To put that into perspective for you, that's more than the entire GDP of some countries.
This shows you exactly where all that cash is going. While they're spreading it around a bit to things like 5G and robotics, the undeniable centerpiece of their whole future strategy is AI. That's where the lion's share of the investment is headed.
And they have a multi-part plan. They're hiring 1,000 new AI scientists, using their dominance in the chip market to build specialized AI hardware, buying up smaller tech companies, and, maybe most importantly, focusing on how AI can actually make the user experience better, not just doing AI for the sake of it.
And as the company itself says, this isn't just about being innovative, it's really a survival strategy. In a world where they're facing more and more competition from rivals in China, this is how they plan to stay on top in these brutally competitive markets.
I mean, what a journey, right? From a humble trading post selling noodles, born in the middle of a war, to a global tech giant now staring right at the frontier of artificial intelligence. Their entire history is defined by making these huge, dramatic pivots. The only question now is, what's the next one going to be?